With the recent fervor over keeping immigrants from entering the United States, the business of border security is absolutely booming, creating a lot of wealth for very few individuals. And if Republicans get their way and finally do manage to build that wall that stretches across our southern border, you can bet that Republican donors will get their cement mixers ready to roll. Joining me now to talk about the big business of border security is Howard Nations. Howard, I think, lost in all of this talk we've had recently about immigration is the fact that trying to stop illegal immigration, or at least giving the appearance of trying to stop illegal immigration, has been a huge business for Republican donors. And so that, to me, is probably one of the reasons why we're hearing such this fevered pitch of we have to do something about immigrants. Why now? Why do they suddenly act like they care? And when you trace it all back, it's, there's a lot of money in this industry that is waiting to be made. As soon as we get the orders, go ahead and build that wall. What's your take on this issue here?
Well, there are billions of dollars involved in this, but we have two distinct problems regarding border security, Farron. One is very real. It's the threat of terrorism. The other is political. It's the immigration issue. The real threat globally, as in America, is cross-border terrorism, cybercrime, piracy, drug trafficking, human trafficking, and everything from internal dissent to separatist movements. In America, we have a 2,000-mile southern border, a 4,000-mile northern border, and we have coast on each side, all of which opens us up to major threats. Now, addressing the problem by building a wall is not the answer. A 700-mile wall exists. The answer is to be found in the virtual wall, in technological defense. And that's where the billions of dollars are being found today. And the move towards the technological defense is we can't use the military-industrial complex because of the doctrine of posse comitatus, which says that you can't use your military to protect your borders. So it becomes an industrial response. So we're getting all this cry for the industrial response and to build a technological fortress. And one is actually in progress. And when you hear all this talk about what we need to do and the border is not protected and all this, what's in progress right now? 12,000 implanted motion sensors, 120 roadside checkpoints, countless high-tech cameras, surveillance balloons, drones that are employed across there's a 100-mile border jurisdiction enforcement zone with 2,000 miles in Mexico and 4,000 miles across Canada that's along both borders. This has raised the issue that you're talking about the huge amount of money. Since the early 90s, the Border Patrol has grown from 4,000 to 23,000. It's now the largest U.S. Law enforcement agency. And $18 billion is spent from the Department of Homeland Security agencies, and $17 billion additional is spent with the Coast Guard and TSA. And here's where the money comes in. The way it's going, by the year 2020, the budget will be $81 billion for this. And so the industrial part of the military-industrial complex is flocking to this.
Well, you just made an interesting point there. We're already talking about a $35 billion a year industry, as you will, because this is money that's coming from the federal government. Some of it is used for government services. Others is going out to private contractors. One great example of how they're doing this is this thing called the Guard Bot, which is essentially this little bubble with 4 wheels, cameras mounted all over it, and it just drives up and down. And little things like that cost millions of dollars.
Which was designed to be used on Mars, incidentally.
Yeah, yeah, it was supposed to go to outer space and help us learn. Instead, we're so close-minded and so fearful that we're using that to check for a family coming across the border. And to me, that's really the heart of the problem. We're willing to spend millions of dollars to save a few $1,000. The Republicans never think of the bigger picture with any of this, and the American people, I'm afraid, suffer from the same problem most of the time too, is that we're willing to spend this $35 billion a year. We're willing to spend millions of dollars on essentially useless technology. If this little thing is driving past you, you wait till it's out of sight and then you cross a border. I mean, it's so stupid when you really think about it. But, so how do we move past this short-sightedness of spending billions to save a few thousands? I mean, as you started with, this, we really do have a problem with terrorism and the technology issue. So how do we shift the public's thinking on this?
Well, Farron, immigration is the oldest problem in America. The problems in America began with the very lax immigration policies of the Mohicans and the Iroquois in welcoming the Pilgrims. Look how that worked out for them. But the immigration problem that they say today about from people from Central America are flooding across the border. The fact is that most enter legally and stay when their permits and their visas expire. So how do you solve that with a wall? Not only that, we're currently averaging 400,000 per year that are being deported from the United States. Jorge Ramos, who's been in the news recently, referred to President Obama as the deporter-in-chief. And we currently have 11 million undocumented workers in the U.S., but they're performing very cheap labor jobs. And the employers rely heavily on them, and their expulsion would cause economic chaos. And now what you're talking about here coming into Texas and coming into California are the transient workers. And the big lie is that they're taking jobs away from Americans. The truth is they're doing jobs Americans won't do. They're highly vital to our agriculture, to our farming, to our ranching, and this is what Donald Trump's wall is designed. Those are the people that are designed to keep them out, and those are the people that you're talking about. They want to use bots designed for Mars to find those people. There's a simpler solution. You prosecute the corporations that hire them. Make it a crime. Walk into any Walmart, inspect any agricultural co-op, audit any big rancher, make it a crime to hire them, and the problem stops. I guarantee you, you put a couple of executives in jail and the problem stops completely because they won't be hiring anybody. But the fact is that the employers do not want a solution. That's why I say this is an imaginary problem. When the employers don't want a solution, the Republicans don't want a solution because they want what their contributors want. And let me tell you about the state of Georgia, what happened. The state of Georgia, the Republican governor, Nathan Deal, celebrated the signing of H.R. 87, toughest immigration law in America, designed to drive illegals, as he referred to them, out of Georgia. It worked. They left. They went on up to South Carolina and Virginia and North Carolina and picked their crops. 2 weeks later, Georgia farmers are in a complete panic. As a result of this tough immigration law, the Georgia Agriculture Commissioner was called to investigate. He surveyed 230 Georgia farmers who said that they needed 11,000 workers to harvest their crops. So they advertised the jobs in every possible way. Please come in, we got all these jobs to pick all these crops. And all those Americans who were losing their plush picking jobs to immigration workers couldn't be found. Millions of dollars worth of blueberries, melons, peaches, and other valuable crops remained unharvested. They rotted in the fields, and the Republican state senator who carried that bill was blasted. A number of small farmers were bankrupted, and a lot of the big complexes lost tons of money. So illegal immigration is not the real problem. It's just a political talking point.
Well, it is. And, it's not just small-time farmers and ranchers either. We have massive corporations represented by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, by the way, people like Tyson Chicken. They have fought very fervently to prevent any form of immigration reform in the United States because they rely on undocumented labor so they can save money. These people go out and, again, this is Tyson Chicken, so they work in the farms or factories or whatever it is. They pay them pennies on the dollar, and so Tyson makes out like a bandit. And the U.S. Chamber of Commerce depends on money from places like Tyson, so they go to bat and they prevent, behind the scenes, they're not doing this openly in public, but they prevent immigration reform from ever being able to happen in the United States. And that's the core of what the Republican Party really wants. So you can have someone like Donald Trump and Chris Christie and Scott Walker with this idea to build this Canadian wall, because God knows that's a problem too, I guess. You know, they can say this all they want, but deep down, the heart of the party's establishment and their financial donors, they do not want any type of limits on immigration whatsoever, do they?
That's right, and that's why I say it's not a real problem. It's a political talking point. If you want a real solution, you acknowledge the important role that the immigration workers play in our society. You grant them specific seasonal work permits to come in and harvest crops. They will happily return home to their families voluntarily. You know what the immigration workers really need is a modern-day Cesar Chavez, who tells all of the immigrants, the pickers, the transients, okay, let's stay home for 1 year. Nobody goes to America. Nobody picks any crops for a year. Nobody works the horses, the cattle for a whole year. Within a year, we'd be begging for them to come back. You let enough crops rot, and we'd be begging for them to come back. So it's time that we give them, acknowledge their true role in our society, give them a seasonal visa, and let's approach this thing honestly. But now you're outside the realm of republicanism.
Absolutely. Howard Nations, thank you very much for talking with us today. This is a very important issue, and it's a side of this issue that has not been discussed in the media yet. So hopefully, maybe we can spark this real conversation about what immigration into the United States really does for this country. Howard, thank you again.
My pleasure, Farron.